Do we really need a Minecraft movie? And is it okay for faith-based films to just preach to the choir? Of the top streaming platforms, where does YouTube rank? And how should we feel about that? We talk about all this and more on this week's episode of Faith and Pop Culture.
Hey, well, what is up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 27 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined at the desk, as I always am, by the son to my sunburn, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Not too much. That reminds me when I was a kid, I feel like every time I go outside, I get sunburn. I played soccer, and I would have like blisters on my nose.
See, I have one famous story in my
bad.
family where I insisted I just don't burn. And I laid out without any sunburn, like the middle of summer in like South Carolina beach. And like just the top of my stomach got so red that it was darker for at least like a year and a half of just like, so hey, you've learned, sometimes you got to be burnt to learn.
Sometimes more than once, sadly.
But speaking of, sadly, so there's some interesting conversation stories, just news things going on in pop culture this week that I think will be good to jump into, discuss, debate, tell Sam why he has bad perspectives on. But the first one, start on a bit of a more somber note, because we lost a legend yesterday as of recording this, and that is Mr. James Earl Jones, the beautiful voice of Darth Vader himself, as well as Mufasa, and he's did other stuff beyond those, but that's his most famous roles. So he passed away, again, he was 93 years old, so it's not like a tragic, unforeseen circumstances, but it's still kind of sad.
Yeah, it's always sad to hear passing of great legends like that, but yeah, R.I.P. James Earl Jones.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know if you guys have seen on the internet, there's sort of this photo that was taken like on the side of a road of like most of the original Star Wars cast. And like, I don't know what the event was for that photo. I think someone snapped this picture, and like as they've begun to pass away, people have like photoshopped that and made the ones that have passed away into sort of forced ghosts.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
And James Earl Jones wasn't in that photo, but people have photoshopped him into it, and then as a ghost. And there's just not a whole. There's like like Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and like the C-3PO actor.
Yeah.
And that's about it of the original cast. Like we've lost.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Carrie Fisher. We've lost, the R2D2. We've lost Mehu, the Chewbacca. Like, so, I don't know. It's just a reminder of mortality. Kind of another quick thing that I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on, but it's just, hey, it's a newsworthy thing, especially if you have 2 9-year-old boys. This becomes even more of a newsworthy thing. And that is that they are making a Minecraft movie. Some execs saw this, the printed money of the Super Mario Brothers movie, and they're like, it is time to make a Minecraft movie. And this movie is going to make just ridiculous, obscene amounts of money. My kids, they are, did you ever grow up playing Minecraft or anything?
No, I think that, how long has that been around?
It's been around for a while, because it was around when like I was, maybe not like a kid, but I was young.
I feel like it's only been in like the last 10 years that it's kind of taken off.
I mean, I think they've like commercialized it more, and
but no,
like merch.
I don't think I've ever.
I never played it growing up. I've tried to play it since, and it's just not my kind of game. But my kids, they can build amazing things, so they're excited for this movie. And I don't know, did you? I don't even know if you saw this.
I didn't even see the trailer. No.
So it's.
I mean, what do you do with?
They decided to do like sort of like a live action animated hybrid. So it's like you have like Jack Black is like he's a human, but he's in like the Minecraft world, and like Jason Momoa, but he's sort of like this almost like Gen Z looking, like kind of mopey guy. And like, I don't know. Like I think it looks dumb. And there's like about the first line in this trailer is a swear word. Like a character looks and they see this like goat or llama or whatever they are in Minecraft. And it's like, what the heck? And I don't say heck. And it's like, I don't know. Like I was like, I'm excited for my kids, but this trailer does nothing for me. If anything, it's like, oh, is it going to be one of those like, into some of the humor later on, like some of the words and stuff.
I guess the question for me is there a way to make a Minecraft movie that isn't dumb?
I feel like they can, because there's been like, they've done like animated shows and stuff, and like, I mean,
of Minecraft,
yeah, like on Netflix and stuff. Like not like
I'm not at all in the Minecraft world, so like whatever my take is,
and like visually it does
not based
stuff
on
that's not
reality.
Humans looks interesting, and it's very colorful, and you can, like, they sort of enter. It's almost like a Jumanji thing where they sort of enter into the mine, or Tron. It looks like, where they're in the Minecraft game, and I'm sure people that love, my kids are like pointing out all these things that like they know from the game and things that go over my head. It's just, for me, it's just the tone. It's like, I know Minecraft's been around for a while, and I guess not just for kids, but I guess it's aimed younger, like and it's so some of the tone and swearing. I just don't know if I'm happy for them. Hey, if you guys are big Minecraft fans, let us know what you thought of the trailer and if you will be checking it out, because I know I will definitely be there on opening weekend to do a review, and also because my kids are going to make me go see. Of course. But there's been a lot of stuff going on. I thought we'd one of the topics that we wanted to kind of dive into is there's a new faith-based movie coming out this week, today,
also
as
this
year. Episode drops, and that is God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, the fifth in the God's Not Dead series.
5, really.
I'll admit, I didn't realize there. Like, I knew the first one. I saw that one, and then I knew there was a couple other ones that I didn't see, and then I didn't realize they were already on 5.
I had no idea. I saw the first one, and I don't even know that I paid attention that they made more after that.
I mean, at this point, like it seems pretty clear that God's not dead. Because keep reminding people.
Like, how do you keep going with that?
So there's some stuff we get into with this movie. I've already seen this movie, which I'll share some of my thoughts in just a second. But one of the things that we got the chance to do kind of in the lead up before this film's release is I had the opportunity to chat with actor Scott Baio, who many of you may know from the sitcom like Happy Days or Charles in Charge. Or there's a bunch of those sort of classic sitcoms back in the day. I'm not sure what all he's been doing since then, but he is doing. He appears one like the villains, as sort of a jerky sleazy campaign manager in this film. So I had the chance to talk to him a bit about, hey, why are these films still relevant? Sort of the God's Not Dead films, and sort of what personally drew you to the role. So again, we have a whole conversation. We'll link it in the show notes. But just to play one clip of sort of what drew him personally to this role.
Well, I think they're relevant. I think that they're more relevant today because it seems like people are trying to remove God from everything. I mean, I remember it got to a point where people were hesitant to say Merry Christmas. So I look, I'm a Christian, raised a Catholic. I believe in certain values, and having a 16-year-old daughter, there's some of those values that I want this country to hold on to, and it seems like, and I don't know why people are trying to get rid of them. And you know what? You can live your own life, but don't get rid of the stuff that's been here for 200, whatever, 40 something years. So I decided to do this film because I would like to help in some way. There's a stat that 40 million Christians don't vote. And I'm sure that those people are complaining about what's happening to the country. And for whatever reason, they don't vote. I don't know whether they're standing on some principle or they don't want to get involved in politics. I don't know. But what will they do one day when God is taken from everything? And I'm not a holy roller. I'm a good Christian guy. I believe in God and Jesus Christ, and we go to church, and I try to be a good human being. But that's the reason why I did it, because I feel like if I could help in any way, I will do it for my child, especially because, quite honestly, Daniel, I'm 63 years old. I don't know how much time I have left. And I mean that not as a joke, but it's a fact. I'm not a young man anymore. And one day I'm going to be gone. And what I would like to leave my child and other children is the country that I grew up in, which was a God-fearing, respectful, law-abiding, prosperous and powerful and safe nation. And we seem to be none of those things right now.
So again, you can check out the whole interview. It's like a 12-minute or so interview. Just talked a bit about his faith and just sort of what he sees in America, like what he hopes the movie will accomplish. So again, check out the full interview for that. But because there is a new kind of faith-based movie, I thought we could talk sort of two different things. One, just take a step back and just sort of evaluate how things have been going. Check in on The Forge, which was the other most recent faith-based movie. Sort of how is it, we talked about that when it came out, but now that it's been out for a while, like how is it done in the theaters? What do we think of that? And just sort of the question that comes up, particularly with a movie like God's Not Dead, is like, who are faith-based movies for? Like, are they for the choir? Are they for Christians? Like, made by Christians, for Christians? Or should these movies be, attempting to reach a broader audience and, be accessible for a non-Christian to come and sit in and watch the movie? So we'll get to that. But kind of first, just because I hadn't really followed up on The Forge. Again, I went to the premiere, my
swanky,
blazer,
swanky.
And I reviewed the movie. Was not a fan of the movie, but I haven't really checked in on how it's doing. And so I was looking it up just this morning, and it seems like box office wise, The Forge is now it has just crossed $20 million. So it's like $20.7 million at the box office. I know the first week that it came out weekend, it finished in the top 5. I think it was 5th, like in the top 5 of the weekly box office. And I guess to give like some context for that, like War Room by the Kendrick brothers made $70 million. So The Forge significantly below that. Courageous in 2011 made $35 million. So this one may get close to that. Overcomer made $38 million in 2019. So I don't know. I think there's different ways to look at that. I don't know what the budget was. I'm assuming it was like $3 to $5 million. So like the movie's made money. There's no question about that. I think it's made less money than the other movies that they have made. So like I don't know if it's like there's two sides of the coin. Like it's a success, but it's maybe not as. It's also maybe the sign that like some of the interest in it is beginning to waver a bit, at least for this movie. But I thought I'd look up some other kind of faith-based movies that I've actually enjoyed a lot more this year. Like Cabrini, which through Angel Studios, which made $20 million, but cost $50 million. Sort of that's the downside of making a beautiful movie. Where you go on location, is that it wasn't financially successful, even if I thought it was a good movie. Sight, which another Angel Studios movie I enjoyed, made $7 million. So again, didn't make a whole lot of noise at the box office. Unsung Hero, which again, another faith-based movie that I enjoyed quite a bit, made $17 million. So again, less. So I don't know, what are your just in some of the box office stuff, like it seems like if nothing else, it shows like there's still a market for sort of the Kendrick brothers brand of movies, even if maybe that market is slightly smaller than it once was.
Yeah, I'm sure the argument could also be made that all of the other 3 movies that you mentioned from them all came out before COVID. So I'm sure in defense of the low numbers that you could say, well, movies just aren't making as much as they used to. So that would be one maybe possible defense of the less than ideal money making from that. But it does show that there is certainly money to be made. And I think it's very clear that there is a market and an audience for these types of films. As much as we ourselves personally may not love these movies or maybe necessarily see a point to them, I think it is clear that there are people who want to see these movies, or at least will pay to see these movies, and it may, it may be more of a duty thing that a lot of these folks are going to the theater than it is necessarily like this is a great movie that I've been anxiously.
I think there are people that they support the faith-based movies. They want to see more like this.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that this movie itself. Kind of one caveat, which just seems like it's, again, if you're not as like plugged into the industry, this might not be something that you think of, but like I think box office is overall is not the best judge for. I mean, it definitely doesn't. Like opening weekend doesn't say really anything about the quality of a movie.
Yeah.
Like I know a lot of people almost equivalent, like it made this much money, it's a good movie, which. Again, isn't necessarily. I think the overall like lifetime money a movie makes says something, but like no one that went, if a movie makes $15 million opening weekend, no one that bought a ticket knows if that movie is good or not. Like, I
Yeah.
think how good a movie does initially reflects the marketing. Like,
Right.
was there enough hype, to get people into the theaters? I think what is more telling for quality is like what's the drop off? Like, what are the next
Yeah.
couple weeks? Like, is there a word of mouth? Like, is the reviews come out and there's there's some buzz to this movie, and you sort of see some of the real good movies that get traction and have a long life, and week after week they're still kind of crushing. Like, that reflects more of the movie's good. Like, just the opening weekend, I think it's a good achievement, but it doesn't necessarily reflect sort of quality of the movie. And I think that's a segue to I thought The Forge was not a good movie.
Yeah.
And to sort of, if you haven't seen my review for God's Not Dead, I think it is a worse movie than The Forge. This movie, one of my least favorite movies I've seen this year. Like, it's just bad. Like, from almost any metric, any perspective. Like, I try and give every movie like the benefit of the doubt, and like be fair, and go into it. I want to like this movie, and it has to prove me otherwise. And this movie proved me
time and again
otherwise. And I was kind of thinking about it because I was like, overall, I feel like I've been pretty positive in my reviews about faith-based movies. Like, I feel like this year there's been a bunch of them, and even movies like there was like that sort of real cornball, like Christmas musical Christian thing, and I thought it was fine. I feel like I was one of the few people that are like, it's cheesy, it's sort of lame, but like it's fine. Like, I feel like I've been mostly positive, and then The Forge, and then God's Not Dead 5, not good reviews. It's like, well, which maybe makes it seem like I'm more grumpy to these movies than I am. It's like, well, I'm really not. But I think maybe the common denominator for these types of movies is that they're the two movies that are like sort of the old school, the old guard of like they predate like Angel Studios or Kingdom Story Group or sort of this new wave of faith-based stuff. Like, the Kendrick brothers have been making movies for over a decade. God's Not Dead, the original one, came out like 10 years ago, and there's this thing about sort of that where they feel like a throwback. In a not a good way, like like an older era, like a relic that we've sort of moved past, and like they're kind of keeping the good fight going. And I think there's issues with these types of movies, and I feel like it's a carryover to sort of these mindsets that I feel like maybe we've mostly kind of grown out of. And I guess the question for us is like, what is that element? Because one of the things I've seen, especially with the Forge movie, like people that have agreed with me that, hey, this isn't great cinema. One of the criticisms that I've seen kind of pop up a bunch is sort of this question that or this critique that this is just preaching to the choir. Like, I wish these movies would be more accessible to non-Christians. Like, this seems like, like people sort of will dismiss a movie like The Forge, saying like no one that's not at their local church 2 or 3 times a week are going to go to this movie theater.
Yeah.
Like, no one's stumbling into God's Not Dead 5 and being like, well, I hate God, and I'm an atheist, but this just seemed like a good story. Like, it's very much aimed at Christians. Exclusively Christians. And I guess the question for us is like, is that okay? Like, do faith-based movies, like kind of art, like, do they need to be accessible to wide audiences? Or like, is it okay to just kind of preach to the choir now and then? Like, what is your...
I think it's totally fine to make a movie for a specific audience. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, we see it all the time from cartoons or like video game movies, for example. Like, those don't necessarily have a super wide audience. And there's a lot of movies that are made sort of in service of the fans of a particular brand or franchise or property, what have you. And so I think it's totally legitimate to make movies for a particular group of people. I think I have no problem with movies being made for the church, by and for the church. I think my issue with it are maybe twofold. One, don't pretend like you're making this to like combat Hollywood. Like, this is the church's answer to like unholy movies that we see coming out of Hollywood, because it's not. Like, that's not what it is. And don't pretend like this is some evangelistic outreach kind of thing, because it clearly is not. And I think, two, if you're going to use a particular art medium to convey a message, respect that art medium. And I think movies like God's Not Dead and The Forge don't respect the medium that they're working with, which is cinema, film, because nothing about these movies are really cinematic, or really, you don't get the sense that they care about the fact that it's a movie. It's like, we care that it's a message that we're going to send to the church, not so much that this is going to be a really compelling story, or it's shot in a really beautiful way, or we give any sort of thought to, the makings of the movie.
Because I think one of the, like you said, that they're not cinematic. I think people can confuse that. 'Cause I even say that in my reviews. Like, there's just nothing really cinematic. All the cinematic qualities seem to be pushed to the side for the purpose of the message. Like, what I don't mean with that is like The Forge doesn't need a bunch of like CGI spectacle, third act, beam in the sky, alien. Like, it's not cinematic in terms of like big, expensive, flashy. It's more just like you said, like the language of film, like the way that character development goes, or like story arc, or the way that you craft the scenes to flow in such a way that you sort of tug on emotion and you sort of take people on a journey. Like, that's more what I mean by cinematic. Like, this is sort of the way that movies work and why they're powerful. Not that they're flashy, but they work with the story in a particular way.
Because you can make you can make a fantastic movie, for next to nothing, and it can be very cinematic.
Well, and faith-based films this year have been cinematic. Like, like Sight, or Unsung Hero, the ones we mentioned earlier, Cabrini, like those were cinematic. Like, they're there's weren't perfect movies, but they did some of that. Because I'm with you. Like, I think that's almost like aiming our scorn or our critiques at the wrong thing. Like, for me, I have no problem with a movie being for a particular audience. Like, like I write books, like my new book, Straight to the Heart, available on Amazon. Like, that's a book written to Christians. Like, not even necessarily like, seeking spiritual people, like for Christians. This is like, as Christians, how do we, engage with culture? And I don't think I need to make, that accessible to, but if you don't believe in God, like, here's, this other track you can go on, or, make it evangelistic, because that's not what it's for. Like, or like worship music. Like, I don't think anyone that's not a Christian is going to tune on, The Fish and listen to Christian worship music, because it's not for them. Like, they're singing about stuff that they don't even believe in. And we don't necessarily have a problem with that. Like, so I think the reason why movies like The Forge or God's Not Dead 5 aren't good is not that they're preaching to the choir. I think the reason they're bad is that there are some tendencies that can slip in when you're preaching to the choir that make for bad art. Like, I think there's this pull towards more like propaganda art than art, where it's like, well, if we're just sort of preaching to the choir, then one, we're preaching, and that doesn't always make good art. And there's just not very much incentive to, like, you don't need to win people over, because like, like The Forge doesn't necessarily need to win people over with the story, because they're trying to win people over with, this movie is about discipleship, you believe in discipleship. This movie is about Jesus, you love Jesus, like, so you're already on board with what we're doing, and they don't necessarily care if they, well, should we also like really think how we frame this camera scene, like how we work on their emotions, because there's this built-in assumption that like, should
we show and not tell, like it is
never.
It is a visual medium after all.
Tell, and if you have to, by necessity.
And I think to your point, like, you wrote a book with your brother, but it didn't mean that you did a lazy job or a bad job, or you didn't get it edited. It's like, we wouldn't tolerate this sort of, less than good use of a particular medium. Like, we don't, if someone wrote a book that was just poorly written, filled with typos, kind of confusing, but it's like, well, but they love Jesus, so I guess I'll read it or try to. Like, you just wouldn't do that. And the same with music, and the same with, visual art, like paintings and stuff. Like, we're not going to hang art in our churches.
Yeah, you're not listening to a tone-deaf singer. Like, regardless of how many times he says.
Sunday morning services are filled with people who are good at music. It's not filled with people who have a good heart but can't carry a tune in a bucket. But again, and we've said this before, but somehow that gets lost when it comes to movie making.
Yeah, and I think kind of with the God's Not Dead movie, like I think there's a way to preach to the choir that doesn't sort of dumb it down.
Yeah.
And doesn't, like, I think art just doesn't always turn out well if you're trying to give people exactly what they want, and not challenge them. I think what makes art powerful is when you can challenge them. And like a movie like God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, like very much like about as simplistic as you can get. Like if the character's a Christian, then they're like saintly. And like, you know, their only conflict is just how bad everyone else in the world is around them, and like how bad the government is. Like, and if they're not a Christian, like, oh boy, like these are the biggest jerks you have ever met. Like there's nothing redeemable about these people. They're not even humans. Like it's very much, I think, in a very like almost like sinful way, dehumanizing the non-Christian characters. Like, you know, where it's not just like, you know, they just don't feel like real people. Like they feel like caricatures of these angry, God-hating, you know, slimy, sleazy, you know, kind of, you know, politicians and stuff. And I feel like, because you don't know you need to, because if a movie like that's attempting to just sort of, hey, we get pleasure at seeing heroic Christians just sort of slam dunk on, you know, on all these dumb atheists, then like that's all you need to do. Like, you know, I feel like what these sort of movies lack, which makes some of the other faith-based movies I think better, is this sort of some of that more like complicated emotions or complicated experience. Like we were talking before we even recorded this, like, yeah, hey, you have an atheist character, you have the villain in the story, like, you know, he can still be God hating, and like he can still be the, you know, the adversary, but like, hey, give him a daughter that he loves, or like, you know, like give him something that humanizes him in a way that it's like, okay, maybe not everyone that we disagree with just walks around insulting people and, you know, hating life and these bitter, like,
kicking puppies.
Yeah, you know, it's like maybe they disagree with us, and they're also people, and they have their own story,
and they have reasons to disagree, not just because
maybe they have trauma in their past that makes them, you know, they hated their father because he abused them, and now they hate the idea of God as the father. Like there's more nuance to it.
Yeah.
But because I think where these movies go off trail is this the reluctance to do that. It's not that they're preaching to the choir. It's that in preaching to the choir, they're just settling for very simplistic stories that demands absolutely nothing from the viewer beyond kind of passively feeling good that our side won the fight.
Yeah.
So again, you can check out my full review. It might be might be the most negative review I've done in quite a while for that movie. But hey, if you want to hear some of my thoughts, and even why I think the message, like I criticize the movie as a movie, but I also criticize the message as the message. And I think there's some issues with the message of the movie that even if you don't even care about the movie, or if you do like the movie and you just want to hear a different perspective on why the message isn't as grand as it might seem, check out my review and, you know, join the conversation on that. I was speaking of movies and TV and things that we watch that are either good or bad or faith-based or secular godless Hollywood or something in between there. Kind of an interesting statistic that just jumped out to me that's kind of caught me off guard that we could kind of dig into, see if there's any significance to that. So Nielsen, who is sort of the group, the organization that like tracks a lot of the data for, like, whenever you see, you know, like Rings of Power has this many million hours watched, like it's all being tracked by this group, which gives you sort of like a bird's eye perspective on, you know, just like what is the entertainment landscape right now? Like, what are people watching? What streaming platform? What companies are doing well? And the most recent, they always run a little bit behind. Like the most recent that I have found for their data comes from July, so a month or two ago, and it's significant because it sort of breaks down all the like the ways we watch television. For example, like broadcast TVs were used for broadcast television 20.3%, cable television 26.7%, and streaming 41.4%. So we're inching up to about halfway. Like, you know, half of all TV usage is streaming. Streaming definitely is slowly taking over everything, which again, we all know that already. What was more surprising is that when they broke down the streaming platforms, like what is the most significant, for the first time, I think ever since they've been tracking this data, YouTube finished number one, which again, you wouldn't think of that. Like you think of like streaming, people watching kind of streaming stuff on their TV, you think, well, Netflix, Disney Plus, like, you know, maybe Paramount, like Peacock or some of those things.
Yeah.
During the Olympics. I think Disney as far as they've been tracking this data, has like almost always been number one, or at least has been number one for a very long time. But YouTube finished number one at 10.4% of all streaming on a television. And on a television is an important note too, because like this is just like people using their like the TV in their living room to watch something, and YouTube was the most. That doesn't count any of the people times people use YouTube on their computer or their phone, like where I think most people use YouTube, on like other devices in their browser. Like this isn't counting any of that. Like this is just when you're sitting in front of your TV, YouTube is the number one streaming one. And there's some interesting quotes as people are just trying to figure out like, what do you do with that? Like, what do you do with YouTube? Like, I feel like YouTube, it's like everyone sort of knows YouTube, and we all know we watch it, but like, where does it fit in with like the in the landscape of all these other options? So there's an article I was reading from a Movie Guide where they pulled some data from other sources, but it says some media executives see YouTube as a companion platform to subscriber streaming services and cable TV, an unwieldy behemoth of non-narrative, creator-led content with a social media slant that doesn't really fit the New York Hollywood nexus of professional media. Which was reported by CNBC. Others, even at times, the same executives view YouTube as an existential threat to the entertainment industry, stealing viewership from subscription streaming services, and with it, the cultural center of American youth. And then YouTube's vice president of Americas, Tara Levy, said, I do think it snuck up on people that YouTube was as important a presence in people's lives and people's viewing experiences, not just on the phone, but in the living room. So what do you think? What is your initial takeaway from something? Like, is this surprising to you? Is this not surprising?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Like I feel like I've kind of been saying this for a while, that like we talk about all these shows and movies and stuff, but YouTube is such a big player in sort of the entertainment space. And I think it's for a lot of those reasons that were mentioned. Like, there's an intimacy with YouTube, I think, that you obviously don't get from just watching a produced show or a movie. I think it's just way more ever present with people today than a lot of these other entertainment options, because you can watch it on your phone. You can interact with people who just watch the same thing you watched. So there is a social media aspect. I mean, it is a social media company, I think, in many respects, but it's more than that. So it's kind of this weird thing that it's not, YouTube isn't producing things like a Netflix is. It's just the platform for its users to produce content, and you can get the whole range of content on there. Like, you can get some really high budget stuff that's narrative driven. You can get really high budget like documentary series on there. You can even rent movies on YouTube, which that's maybe a different sort of category. But then you can get to the very like talking straight to your iPhone kind of vloggy, just, hey, this is my day, come get ready with me, or whatever. So it's such a range. And so I think it makes sense that a lot of people are spending more time with YouTube than they are with any of these other platforms. And just from my own experience and with my own family, like, oftentimes if we're all sitting down watching something, like, it's something on YouTube, more so than it's going to be like a movie or a show on Disney. Like, we still watch stuff on Disney and other platforms, but most of the time it's going to be YouTube. Like, my parents watch YouTube. A lot of people that I talk to, like, they watch YouTube, or they follow certain creators on YouTube. And so I don't know where it fits into the broader narrative, but I think it's a way more powerful presence, I think, than some of these other streaming.
Yeah, and there is rumors that of the 10.4%, that about 6% of that we're actually watching the Faith and Pop Culture podcast.
Yeah.
YouTube streaming.
Our numbers are lagging that a little, but I think we'll see when they update it. I'm sure that'll reflect in our streaming numbers.
Data, we'll have to follow up on that. But I think you're right. I think the tricky thing is, even like the industry people are in those quotes, like, it's just like, where does this fit in? And like, where does this fit in as a Christian? Because you, like, so much of we think of like pop culture engagement entertainment, you think of like, what's the new movie Hollywood released this week?
Mm-hmm.
You know, still very, in some ways, still very working within the framework of like pre-YouTube. Or like, I know YouTube's been around a long time now, but like sort of the explosion of YouTube, like sort of, we're still very much sort of old school of like, well, Hollywood's going to release a movie every week, and that's sort of the big thing that's going to shape society, and where it's like, well, like, but more people are actually engaged with content that's not the big Hollywood movies, like, so like in one sense, there's a case to be made that like Christians should be way more focused on like, how is social media, how is like YouTube influencing, what are the messages and stuff, and less on what's the ideologies of this one movie that people are going to go see. I think kind of the counterpoint to that is just that, like, I think because YouTube is so expansive that in some ways it ceases to be influential on like a more unified cultural level. Like it's, you might have 10 times the amount of people watching YouTube as this movie, but those people are all watching completely different things, whereas like, a new Dune 3 comes out and it's like, well, like we're all talking about this one thing. Like there's a conversation to be had about this one movie that still makes it in some ways more crucial or more like culture shaping, or at least more like visible than 10 people that are watching 10 different YouTube channels.
Yeah, well, there's like a diffuse nature of YouTube. I think that's what makes it hard, especially for Christians to say, well, what do you do to engage in that? Or maybe you've got teenage kids that have a favorite YouTuber or something. It's less simple than just like, okay, well, let's watch this TV show that you're into. It may be that you're into like 4 or 5 different YouTube channels, and they all kind of serve you in different ways, and you get different things from them. And so it is just a trickier thing to engage with. Like it's not like a thing. It's like it's a platform that has many things that people can both learn from and be entertained by, and engage with. And so it is just I think a trickier medium to sort of meaningfully engage with.
But here, let me use that platform you set up to plug the collision.
Yeah.
Or at least the hope behind it. Sort of why we evaluate things like movies beyond just like, is it safe, not safe, good for kids, not good for kids, like where we actually look at the different stuff going on. Like I feel like because of things like YouTube shifting the landscape, like I think the days of just, okay, if we need to protect our kids from entertainment, like we need to just sort of go to this website and like see how this one movie, is this safe? You just tell us, yes or no. And like, because we're quickly going to the time where you can't do that. You can't do that for YouTube. Like you're not going to have, we do a lot of reviews here at the Collision. We're not reviewing every YouTube video that's, coming out. Like I feel like there needs to be a shift in the way we approach this, of less just, hey, we need to know if these 5 or 6 things, released in July are going to be good for our kids, or if we should watch them, or what they mean. And we need to start moving more towards, like, we need to equip people not just to engage with like this movie, but like, engage with movies, like think critically about entertainment in a way that they can carry those principles, those approaches with them when they're watching stuff that there isn't reviews for, and people, YouTube channels or creators that people haven't covered. Like more an emphasis on that, sort of like the idea of like the equivalent would be like apologetics in church. Like I think sort of the days of just, hey, memorize these 3 arguments and then like go spring them on people. Like, no, like we actually just, more than that, we need to teach young adults to like, and grown adults to like think critically and like about faith and be able to have those thoughtful conversations, not just sort of memorize a bunch of data. Like I feel like stats like this just make me think like we need, as the church, need to emphasize a lot more like equipping people to engage with culture and like think critically about what is a movie beyond just, this one movie has too many swear words for me, so I'm not going to watch it. Like, because we're quickly entering the uncharted frontier where like, that's just not going to be a viable approach for the church to be able to cover all these things for people that haven't learned to think critically for themselves.
Yeah, I think it definitely comes down to having tools in your toolkit that allow you to help make decisions for yourself and your kids across platforms and mediums, and not just like, one specific movie at a time. Like, okay, this is good, that's bad. Like, we need to be able to think about this holistically, so that, again, kids are getting phones at earlier ages, like we talked about last week. And there's far more dangers sort of in the social media realm than there are in, movie X is good or bad, or, has bad influences or good influences in it. Like, so I think being able to think about things holistically is going to be way more important moving forward, especially in just the sort of the diverse media landscape that we are facing now than it's ever been before.
Yeah, and I even do it with my kids. Like I do my best to guard them from seeing a bunch of junk that they shouldn't be seeing at that age. But like I'm also very intentional about like probably the biggest part of me protecting them is just helping them learn to think through and for themselves how to if they do see things in films, like they can think through that and process that even at a young age.
Yeah,
And about different worldviews and stuff. And I feel like that's going to protect them long term more than just trying to hold back the tidal wave of godless entertainment, and hoping that the kids don't get wet. But hey, again, if you're watching us on YouTube, share your thoughts in the comment section, or if you're listening to us, send us an email, send us a comment, let us know sort of how you where you watch your entertainment and how you navigate some of that shifting entertainment landscape. But speaking of entertainment that is not on YouTube but is in fact in the movie theaters, we have Out Now and Coming Soon. So the big movie that's out now is Beetlejuice, which I mentioned last week that I wasn't excited for this movie. Didn't see the first Beetlejuice and didn't want to see the second Beetlejuice. And it was good, actually. It's not one that I would watch again, or I love this movie, but it wasn't terrible. And I think...
Well, that's good.
And there is...
I'm happy for you.
Yeah, it's nice when you go to the movie theater and the movies aren't terrible. And there just is something about like a guy like Tim Burton that... Like you can just sense some of the creativity and the energy in the screen. Is doing some of the things that's like we were talking about earlier. Some of the faith-based stuff isn't doing, where it's just like you just sense creativity. Like this guy's coming up with these visuals and the way that they're framing things. And where it's like there's fresh ideas and there's something kind of enjoyable about that, even if maybe the story isn't your cup of tea. And it is. I was telling you, like, I'm kind of surprised. And maybe it's just that the circles I'm in, I don't see this as much, but I was expecting, even in my review, I sort of like brace myself for, like, I sort of give a little TED talk about like, okay, like, people are going to be divided over, sort of the Halloween type, aesthetics of this. Like, is this satanic promotion or is this just sort of fun fantasy fiction? And I haven't seen a whole lot of that. Like, I haven't, as of now, like, haven't got any angry comments on my review telling me I'm not a Christian.
That's probably because you blocked all of them.
Yeah, maybe I've just reached that utopia where I don't experience those people anymore.
You don't hear it anymore.
So I don't know. I don't know if people are just, maybe it's like an older movie and people sort of know Beetlejuice, or it's just, but I haven't seen as much of those sort of like, PSAs on Facebook, this is why America is falling apart because we have this Beetlejuice character and the afterlife. And so I don't know. I don't think it's like a must-see movie, but if you're a fan of the first one, you can maybe check that out. Kind of the other thing that's out that we thought we would mention is Rings of Power episode 4. Are you caught up yet?
Oh yeah,
You've all 4.
All 4.
Okay, what's your initial quick thought on?
I like it. Yeah, it's good. I think it's really good.
Hobbit thumbs up. I enjoyed episode 4 was total just fan service. I think it's more than that. I think people have dismissed it as that. I think some of the action and some of the stuff, the more you think about it, it does all tie into like the characters' journeys, and it's not just like empty spectacle. But we got Tom Bombadil, who is and you've read the Lord of the Rings, but even like, most of the dialogue he says, like the whole encounter, they basically recreate all the material that was cut from the movies, like the word for word dialogue that he says to and like the wizard guy being caught in the tree is a scene that happens to the hobbits in the books, and in like the barrel, right, the ghosts are from the material that was cut. So like, I don't know, I'm enjoying this season a lot, and I feel like episode 4, I don't know if it was my favorite episode, but it was
really good.
It was good. There was a lot of action, a lot of like nerdy Tolkien stuff that I enjoyed.
Yeah, but I think so far it's been, I think, a really well made series, and I think even better than the first season. I think it's just really getting into some of the good stuff, and yeah, like the conversations are good, the dialogue is good. Obviously, like wardrobe and set design is amazing. But yeah, I've really been enjoying it so far.
Yeah, because I'm still like, again, I'm excited. Seems like there's gonna be some pretty big battles and action coming up. But like for me, almost the more interesting than just like the battles is like Elrond and Galadriel. Like, do we use the rings? Like, they're kind of evil, but but it also told us not to go here where these ghosts are, and we lost, someone died. Like, so there's good, and some of those tension to me, I think, is what makes the Lord of the Rings interesting. So again, I'm looking forward to episode number 5, halfway through the season. I hate that
I know it's so short. Only 8 episodes, huh?
Even 10 episodes would have been better. As far as things coming out, heads up about the one we've already talked about, God's Not Dead and God We Trust. I don't think it's a good movie. I don't think the fact that I think that is going to change the minds of anyone. I think the people that wanted to go see this movie are going to go see this movie. Like, and again, 5 films in, I feel like Christians know what these movies are. This isn't an unknown quantity. Either you like what they're selling you or you don't. So I will be curious to see how much. Like, I know the first God's Not Dead made just ridiculous amounts of money. It's a phenomenon for the budget. I don't know if the 2 through 4 have done that. I'm guessing not. So we'll see. Again, and this is very much like a political. Like, there's like an opening montage of like COVID lockdowns and like riots and vaccine. Like, it's very like on the nose. Like, this is dealing with politics. Coming a couple months before an election, so we'll see sort of how some of that lands. As far as other like new movies, I'm not sure if I'm going to see anything this week. I may see. There's a sort of a horror movie, Speak No Evil, which is a Blumhouse movie starring James McAvoy, who's again a great actor. I'm kind of waiting to see some of the other reviews and stuff. Like, I might check this out just because, I don't know, now and then you just need a good horror movie. Kind of a thriller. So stay tuned on our channel. We may have a review for that. And one that I will be checking out, which will be coming out the week after, but I'll be able to have a review early for that, is Transformers 1, an animated Transformers movie. I got an early screening for this movie, so we'll have that out like the start of next week. And hey, are you playing Transformers growing up?
I didn't really too much, no.
You're a deprived child.
I know, it's sad.
You were playing with sticks in the backyard.
I know,
parents wouldn't even buy you a Transformer. But my kids love Transformers, so I will be checking that out. But something else that you should probably check out is the last segment of this podcast. We have things we like that you should like too. So this is my week to share a little bit of something that I like, and I won't, to the shock of probably all of you. I thought I would not take another week off of sharing heavy metal. I am wearing a heavy metal, Italian power metal, Legends, Rhapsody of Fire t-shirt, but I thought I would share something else that is almost as near and dear to my heart, and that is Buc-ee's. If you've never been to a Buc-ee's, then you are living a half-life, a cursed life, because Buc-ee's is really one of the pinnacles, I think, of just Western society and achievement. You essentially have like a QT gas station, which I got together with Walmart and had a child, and like maybe, an ancestor of Cracker Barrel or something. Like, put all those in a blender and you get Buc-ee's, which is like a gas station on steroids. Like, it's not even just a gas; it's a way of life. Like, they're borderline cult for Buc-ee's. You can go there. You can get like great like beef brisket sandwiches. You can get their beaver pellets, which are just the bomb. These little, almost like Cheetos, but like way better and way crunchier. There's like merch. Like, I have a Buc-ee's hoodie. You can get like Buc-ee's swim gear and underwear and hats, and so all power to the beaver. I know you've been to a Buc-ee's, because I've been preaching that gospel to everyone that I know. Are you a convert yet, or are you still a Buc-ee's seeker?
No, I wouldn't say I'm a Buc-ee's seeker. I find them incredibly stressful to go to. Like, just the whole, it's just such a stimulation overload.
Well, you have to go at the right time, because like I love Buc-ee's. I don't necessarily always like people. And if you go at like a rush hour,
well, no, I've been at various, and I've been to a few at various times, and people are no people. I could drive right past a Buc-ee's, and I'd be all right.
So my message hasn't quite sunk in. I will keep working on that.
No, it hasn't. But see, I will say they have some good snacks. And I think they've got some good snacks, and so that's good. I like that about them. But otherwise, it's just sort of like this overload of.
It is a lot.
Just ridiculous creations, I will say.
But I will say I'm a gas station.
My kids love Buc-ee's.
Like, I can like there's nothing that excites me more than going to a gas station.
Yeah.
Like even when like me and my wife travel to different countries, like one of the first things I want to do is go check out the gas stations and like see the different snacks and stuff. Like that's, you know, I could do a deep dive of like the pros and cons of like every major gas station chain. Like that's my thing. I like gas stations, and this is like
next level. It really is. And I will say, you know, to my great disappointment, their billboard advertising things, it's like 200 miles at a giant Buc-ee's, and like your kids can see that in the back seat, and it's like, we're going like 2 miles, and it's like, and I don't need to have this conversation of why don't we go to Buc-ee's. It's like, well, because we're not driving 200 miles today. Like we're gonna go, you know, 5 miles down the road and to this other place. But so I do have a bone to pick with him about their like super early like billboard usage, like, you know, it's a like, state away. It's like, okay, we get it. Like,
because there's one in like the town that we live, like where we live, a big Buc-ee's billboard. I think the closest Buc-ee's is like 2 hours away.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, this is a constant reminder that it exists.
Although we are getting a Buc-ee's in like a year, I think.
Yeah, so hey, if you've never been to Buc-ee's, I think they're mostly sort of in like the southeast states, like they're from Texas, as you would imagine. Yeah. I think they're slowly spreading the Buc-ee's takeover. But if you don't live anywhere near one, then poor you. I sympathize with you. But if you do live by a Buc-ee's, definitely go check it out. But we're glad that whether you've checked out a Buc-ee's or not, you've at least checked out our Faith and Pop Culture podcast. Again, enjoy having you every week as we just dive into stuff. Always, again, it's sort of like a mystery bag. You never know what you're going to get with what's going on in culture. Sometimes there's big stories, sometimes there's not. But regardless, we're glad that you have joined us, and we hope that you will join us next week, every Thursday, for more conversations on faith and pop culture.